It's cross-cultural, it's universal. When I was going to college many years ago, we studied a woman named Margaret Mead. Margaret Mead actually went around teaching people that in different cultures, different facial expressions meant different things. That didn't make sense to some of her students who went out and studied and said to people all across the world, show me the face you would make if your daughter got married to someone you liked. Show me the face that you would make if your uncle broke his leg. Show me the face that you would make if you came upon a dead animal. And the facial expressions, those muscles were exactly the same in all cultures. And in fact, they're the same in all primates. Baby sons. I can't resist. So we have, in order to get emotionally intelligent, we really have to understand what emotions are. And this is related to the brain in so many ways, because it turns out in the Cartesian world, we have tried to separate thoughts from emotions. And it turns out that we can't really do that. So an emotion is actually the brain's signal to move. It's a signal to do something different. So you see a child having a big emotional response, his brain is telling him something's not right. I need to do something different. Instead, often what we see is people punishing children for having strong emotions. Emotional intelligence has several definitions, but basically it's the capacity for being able to know what we feel and to be able to talk about it. We have to be able to name it and tame it. EQ differs from IQ. EQ is one of the things that some people would call it. And there are some problems with this whole construct of EQ, which I'll talk about tomorrow, actually. But EQ is basically something that gets better and better and better with age, whereas IQ, if I give you an IQ test when you're 6, and I give you another one when you're 16, and I give you another one when you're 16, unless you've had a head injury or some degenerative disease, the number's going to be pretty much the same. EQ, on the other hand, just gets better and better and better as we get older. So if you want to give your child a low EQ, emotional quotient, act out your emotions, hate change. I apologize for the small type. It turns out there's a lot of ways to give your child a low EQ. Blame everybody else for your problems, be a victim, or be a bully, accuse and project. Deny, avoid, suppress your emotions, demand instant gratification. Avoid anything that causes you to feel, wish that things were different. Do it the same way every time, even when it doesn't work. Go it alone, refuse help, don't teach help-seeking behavior. Practice negativity, and refuse to put yourself in another's position, which is basically be unempathic. So if you want a child with a low EQ, this is how to do it right here. A lot of adults have kind of a low EQ because they haven't learned the basic rule of Q-tip. Quit taking it personally. When a child is acting out, it's because they have a skill deficit, and we as adults can loan our frontal lobes to teach the skill. So this is basically this is not very readable, I apologize for that. But basically this is, if you take that triune brain model, and you go brainstem, paleomammalian brain, or limbic system, and cortex, these are the functions, the sensitive periods, stress, and what stress does, and what it looks like, and then skill for the adults to use. So if a child is, you can see from a child they're really tantruming, they're really acting out in big ways, crying, logic and reasoning with them isn't going to work because they're down here in the brainstem, in the reptilian part of their brain, where they're basically a reptile. So imagine trying to reason with a frog. If you have a child who's really upset, who's really feeling big emotions, reasoning with him and using logic isn't going to work because frogs are nonverbal. So what you have to do is know how to get that child from their brainstem up into their paleomammalian brain, their limbic brain. So what you want to do is, first of all, be composed, right? Don't take it personally. Know how to regulate yourself first. And then you have to know how to connect with a child who's tantruming, a child who's having really big emotions. So one of the ways to do that is to really notice the child, to say, arms are like this, your feet are like this, you seem angry, something must have happened. Or you can say something like, here's a great example. I worked when I was a postdoc, I worked at a neurodevelopmental clinic, and we were on the 4th floor of a hospital, and we used to do day-long evaluations of children. And somebody brought a 9-year-old to be evaluated, didn't tell him why he was going, didn't explain anything about what was happening, brought him up in the elevator, and the child was in the corner of the elevator screaming his head off. He was terrified. And I had just come from a seminar, so I felt like I knew what to do. And I walked in, and thank goodness this worked, because I would have looked really foolish if it hadn't. But he was huddled up like this in the elevator, screaming. And it was a Monday morning, so everybody in the hospital was waiting to use the elevator, and they couldn't use the elevator. And I said to him, "Your arms are just like this." He had to look at me. The minute I had eye contact, I could say, "There you are. See all these people standing out there? They need to get on the elevator. Would you be willing to come out here?" And I told him he was safe, and that it was okay, nothing bad was going to happen to him. This was a safe thing, but I got that eye contact first. And then I was also really present because I had all his coworkers watching me trying to see what I was going to do. So, but this is how we get a child from their brainstem up into their limbic system. Once we had him in his limbic system, then we could get connected with him. And once we got connected, then we could talk to him about what was going to happen next. Does that make sense? So, the child is looking for attention. You can talk to them. They can use their words. But until they get connection, you're not going to get them into problem solving mode either. So, recent research on EQ says that people with higher emotional intelligence have better health, they are higher achievers, they have improved executive functions, that's what we do up here in our prefrontal cortex, decreased violence and substance use, and psychological well-being. So a couple of parting thoughts, and then we'll open it up for questions. Hopefully we have some. Human relationships are building blocks. We are a clannish species. We are wired to belong. We are wired for it. We come pre-wired for that. We don't come pre-wired to solve problems. We don't come pre-wired to plan and execute actions. But we do come pre-wired to make sure that we survive by connecting with our caregivers. It's almost never too late to develop the brain, but as the persons in the video said, it's really better to start young. Connections with others create neural connections in the brain. Self-regulation is the key to all resilience, and the 4 brain smart principles for you to use every day. I hope we got them. The best exercise for the brain is? Exercise. Okay. The brain is pattern seeking and survival oriented. Anybody know the next one? Connections on the outside with other people, build connections on the inside. And the last one is brain functions best when the child feels safe. Good student back there. And so, there they are. But I'm glad we quizzed ourselves because that means we all have an idea of them. There are a number of books by Becky Bailey. A lot of what I'm saying really comes from her that I've learned from her. I already knew the brain pretty well when I met her, but she has taken it and put it into a really pretty simplified form that makes a lot of sense to me. When I was doing a lot of neuropsychological evaluations, I was doing several a week, and on kids. And what I noticed most of all is parents would bring their children to be evaluated because they thought, well, maybe he's got a learning disability, maybe he's got ADHD, maybe there's something, maybe he's autistic, all these big worries the parents get. But what I saw more than anything else is, yes, of course there are learning disabilities, and of course there are brain dysfunctions that are based on some hard wiring, but most of the time there's also some problems with that child's ability to feel safe and feel connected. So I started looking at all of the parenting programs that are out there, and I found this one called Conscious Discipline. And because it's brain-based, and because it's based on composure and mindfulness, it's my favorite. And I know there are lots of programs out there. They're all basically saying the same thing. Let's help children learn to self-regulate. But I like this one because it's so based on the brain.